Hello and welcome along to this little video that's going to help you understand messaging with BPMN and Camunda specifically. So we're going to be using what BPMN has to offer and Camunda's engine in order to send messages, receive messages, and generally have communication between processes and other systems. My name is Niall Deehan. I'm an international consultant with Camunda. And perched on my arm right now is Grant Flagcastles, my very reliable hawk. Don't worry if you don't have a hawk of your own, you can still complete this tutorial with that one. So this particular tutorial is going to start at a certain point that requires you people to know a little bit about what I'll be doing in advance. Those prerequisites for the video are understanding Java in some way. I'll be using Java for the API communication. Understanding the REST API, or not Camunda's REST API, but REST in general. I'll be using the REST API for communication as well. It'll be really good to understand the basics of Camunda, how to start it up, what the front-end applications are for and how they're used, and as well the basic understanding of BPMN, how tokens flow and that sort of thing is really, really useful. If you don't know these or you're not entirely comfortable with those yet, then a very good idea would be to check out some of the other tutorials I've made. I've got them for all sorts of bits of these things. But if you're happy enough to continue, then the things we'll be learning about are we'll be learning about how to start a process with a message, meaning that if we send a message to the engine, it will somehow find the right process and it'll start an instance of that process. As well as that, we have the idea of waiting for a process, waiting for a message mid-process. That would be the idea that during our process, it's in transition, or sorry, in the middle of running, and at some point you need a message to tell it to continue. We'll also be showing how to send messages from one process to another process, specifically in this case, starting another process. So that'd be messaging within the engine. And then also we'll be talking about non-interrupting messages. This is a really good feature. This means that you can send a message to a process without necessarily interrupting what's happening with it. So you can maybe do these things in parallel. It can receive a message while at the same time have another state active as well. And then finally I'll talk about the signal event. So most of these involve the message event, but the signal event is another symbol in BPMN and is more so used for broadcasts. And I'll maybe have a quick chat and show you guys how signals can be used within Camunda and what use cases they have. Okay, so with that done, let's get started. Okay, and here we are inside Eclipse. I've created a project already called BPMN Communication. I created this using the Maven archetype, which if you have any questions about, you can check out in the Java tutorial video. But it does mean that right here in resources, I have a process.bpmn file, and here's I'm going to build my process. So let's open this up. So everything I'm going to do is going to involve the actual Camunda modeler, which looks like this. So everything I add, I'm going to either add the symbols here and then I'm going to add execution semantics here on the right where the properties panel is. So let's start. So I'm going to model a very common process for me, which is someone posts on Camunda's forum. So someone posts a question on the forum. Great stuff. This happens all the time. I quite like the Camunda forum, so I spend a lot of time doing that. So what will happen is a form will come in, and then Niall needs to be notified about this. So for that, I'm going to select send task, and then inform Niall about a new forum question. Great stuff. So after that, of course, I read the question, and amazingly enough, sometimes I don't always know the answer to these things. So we have two possibilities. Now this is a gateway, and usually gateways are done based on data, but this is actually going to be done based on a message we receive back. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to change this to an event-based gateway, which means I'm going to be waiting for one of two possible messages. One is going to be the happy path, which is Niall knows the answer. Okay, and the other one is Niall has no idea. So these are the two possibilities that could happen. So if we actually get this far, Niall knows the answer, we then will have a task that says answer the question. Great stuff. And that'll be a user task. And then the process will end. If I have no idea about the answer, I don't give up. You'd be delighted to know. In that case, I generally contact somebody far more qualified to answer any question, which is our good friend T-Dog. So I'm going to say ask T-Dog for help. Okay. So this is a pretty simple process. It's got a lot of happy path stuff in here, but actually a few other weird things could happen. For instance, while I'm answering the question, and this has happened frequently, the user might have edited the question. So maybe the question has changed slightly. So when that happens, I don't want to stop writing my answer because potentially what I've written is perfectly relevant. But I may want to check out what the changes are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a boundary event here, which means while I'm answering the question, if I get a message that says that the question has changed, or maybe being edited is more accurate. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another user task, and this one here is going to be read the question again. And this is optional because this will happen. What this will do is it won't actually interrupt the process. So it'll actually create a second token that'll go up here and we'll wait here in parallel. So I will actually have both of these tasks at the same time, which means that anytime the question is updated, this can happen multiple times. But if I do answer the question, I don't really care about reading it again. So in that case, I'm going to add a terminate event here to make sure that I stop any of the tokens. Okay, so this looks pretty good. This is my usual day. This is post arrives to the forum, Niall informs about the question, then Niall will either know the answer or he won't. And then we have here, I'll answer the question. Sometimes it might change, so I might need to reread the question again. And in the end, we have a terminate event. There's one more thing that might happen. Obviously, in the important job that I do, it's possible that while I have all these lovely questions to answer, some important work shows up. And this could mean that no matter how many questions I'm dealing with, because this could happen multiple times, if I have something like some important work to do, I need to drop what I'm doing. I need to stop all of these questions to answer. That can be someone else's responsibility. And instead, I can then go ahead and do my important work. Okay, so that's basically our model. This looks about right. This has basically everything that I need to take care of. And now that it's modeled, I actually just need to make this executable. And once that's done, it should be able to run okay. So now let's actually get started on making these things executable. We'll start at the very beginning here with our message event. So this is the message that will arrive in to start the process. So I'm going to open the properties panel up. This is where all of the message configuration is going to happen. And I just need to see here, I've got a message drop down. There's none defined, which is why it's empty. So to define a new message, I'm going to click on the plus. This will give me a generated message name. It's a very good idea to make your own. These things are not so useful. So I'm going to just change the message to question created. Okay, so that's actually all I need to do. It's up to the actual API to start the process to make sure it correlates correctly, but that's all I need. I just need this question created message name. Next, I have this send task that's going to inform Niall about something. For now, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to just create a Java class I'm going to implement, and I will leave that for now as just blank, and I'll come back to that later. Now, next I need either Niall knows the answer or Niall has no idea. Now, once again, I can select these, but now from the drop-down, I now have the message I created before, because it's possible to wait for the same message multiple times. But for this, I don't need that message. I need to create a new one, and that's going to be called Niall knows. And then, of course, the bottom one, which is, again, new message, is going to be called Niall has no idea. Alrighty. So then we arrive up here. We have another message, same process again. This message is going to be a question edited. And then down here we have a signal event. So the signal event is very different from the message event in a few different ways. The first is, of course, a message event, as we'll show in a few minutes, requires a one-to-one correlation. You need to have, you can't have a broadcast in a message, but a signal can actually be broadcast into the engine, then everything waiting for it will pick that up. So for this, there's no drop down yet. These aren't the same as messages. They have a different API. So instead, I need to create a plus here and say important work. Okay, that's the name of the signal that's going to be sent. Alrighty, so the next thing I need to implement would be this thing here. Now, asking TDog for help is not all that easy. He's a very busy guy, so I'm going to create another process, which is going to actually be started by this. So I'm going to open up a new diagram here, and I'm going to start this guy here, called ask need TDog's help. Okay, and then once that happens, we basically have a user task in which TDog answers the question, and then we're done. So for this, we actually once again need this message name, and it's going to be ask TDog. Okay, and this process here is going to be called ask TDog. And I just need to save this with the rest of my project. So let's just grab the location here of my project. Okay. And I just need to save this. Right here. Okay, let's call that TDog. Okay, there we go. So now how am I going to start this process from here? Well, because correlating a message is more complicated than waiting for one, I'm going to use, first of all, the message here. I'm going to use the message name, ask TDog. And I'm actually going to use the Java API to send this message. Because it's internal, I can send it within the engine. So for that, I'm going to return back to Eclipse. I'm going to create a Java class that's going to actually send this message out, and importantly, also send the question out, because we can also send some data as well. So here I am back in Eclipse, and I'm just going to create a new Java class in here in my main folder. And this Java class just needs to implement the Java delegate interface. Okay, and I just need to give this a name, ask TDog for help, and then finish. So this will create a Java class that will have an execute method. Alrighty, so this method basically gives us is what runs when you attach a Java class to a symbol in BPMN, and that is run by the engine. So in this case, we're sending a message to the engine that is going to trigger another process. And I'm going to use the execution variable. I'm going to get the process engine services. So this is the first way into the API, and to send a message I need to get the runtime service, and once there I can create a message correlation. Okay, so this can send a message within the engine, and specifically the message we're going to send is going to be defined here, ask TDog. Okay, I'm going to send this along now, and then I can say just correlate. Okay. So it's not quite enough really just to send this message. I mean, what does it mean? So I'm actually going to send it along with some data. I'm going to assume that there is going to be the question as a process variable. And I'm going to ask the execution to give me a variable which is going to be called question. And now I'd like to send that with my message. It's important that we can actually send these variables because we want to give context to this particular message. So to do that, I'm just going to say set variable, and it's going to be question, and it's going to have the value question. Okay, so now I'm going to basically start this process, and it's going to have the question attached to it that TDog can answer. Okay, so let's save that, and now I need to attach this to my message. So to do that, I'm just going to get the qualified name here of the class. I'm going to go back to the command modeler, And I'm going to go to this event here. I'm going to choose Java classes implementation, and I'm going to paste that there and save. So there we have, we've done that now, and we've actually implemented this call. So now let's run this and find out how it all works and how it all fits together. Now, one thing I did actually do just on my own here is that I implemented this. This doesn't actually do anything except for it calls a Java class, and it specifically calls the logger delegate, which is located as created by the archetype, and this will simply log out what I'm doing to the console. If you wanted to create a REST call from here, it would be really, really simple, or any sort of call. You would simply go to your class here, and you can basically write anything you like. Any information you prefer. So we can see here's the logger delegate. Right now it's just going to print out the information about what we're doing, and then it's going to show that in the console. But of course, if you wanted to make a call, you basically have all of whatever Java libraries and classes you have to make any REST call you like. But in this case, I'm not going to do that because it will take a little bit more time. So at the moment I have Camunda running here. This is the front end here, Cockpit, and you can see I just installed a fresh installation of Camunda. I have the demo process here in the processes, and now I'm going to go back and just deploy my new process. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the documentation and Postman in order to trigger the events that I've created. So let's head back to Eclipse, and let's just right click on that, and I'm going to just deploy this directly to Wildfly, which is where I'm running Camunda on locally. So if I select BPMN communication here, I'm going to use clean Wildfly deploy, and this should then deploy my process to the running instance of Wildfly that I have. The build was successful, which is good news, which means if I go back to Opera and I refresh my page, I should be able to see that I have 2 new processes deployed. And there they are. We have BPMN communication and Ask TDoc. So if I click on here, we'll be able to see that our process is here and deployed, and there's no instances here running, but we're going to change that right now, and we're going to do that by, as I said, going to the docs, looking at how to implement something, and then using Postman or whatever tool you prefer to send these messages in. So first things first, I'm going to go to docs.camunda.org, and then I'm going to go to the reference, REST API, and then somewhere down here is message, and message has one method called correlate. Okay, if you want to read about all the possible inputs and stuff, they're all here. I'm going to scoot all the way down to the example here, and this is what I'm going to be sending. So if I open up Postman, okay, and I'm going to make a post call, I'm going to send this to my local host. So this is going to be, let's just have this guy here. So it's going to be localhost 8080 engine rest. So here's the endpoint of the engine. This could differ depending on how you're using Camunda. So if you're using Spring Boot, for instance, it might not be engine rest. It might be something else. But what we're doing here is we're communicating with my local Wildfly, in which case the endpoint is engine rest and message. So next up, I'm going to add a body, and it's going to be application JSON, and I'm going to be able to send in now some details about the message I want to send. So I'm going to copy this, and I'll explain what all this means. So first of all, we need the message name. This is the name of the message we're sending into the engine. So we want to start this process, so therefore question created is our message name. Okay, pretty straightforward. And so I'm adding that there. I'm also going to add a business key. This is kind of important for correlation because we can have lots and lots of processes that begin. We want to give each of them some sort of unique ID so we can keep communication going to the process. So I'm going to give this a business key of 1. I don't need correlation keys. I'll talk about those later. So let's remove those. And I am going to send in a variable. I'm going to send in a variable called question. And question is going to have a value. It's a string. It's going to be something like, how do you start a process with a message? A very relevant question. Let's get rid of this. Okay, and okay, so here we are. So this will send a message into the engine that will then start a process. Now the important thing to know is, which is kind of cool, we actually don't need to know anything about the process we're starting at all. We just need to know this message that we're sending in. The engine itself will actually make sure it tries to correlate this. So if I send this in, we get no content, which is good news, which is exactly what we want. And if I go back to Opera and refresh this page, okay, we should see, we have a token right there. We can see the history of it and that it moved, started here, it ran this printout, and now it's waiting for the response. And we even have the question. How do you start a process? Okay, so next we got to find out if Nile knows this or not, which is very important stuff. So let's do that next. So luckily enough, I have some insider knowledge on this, and I'm fairly confident Nile has a good idea about this answer. So I'm going to go back to Postman. I'm going to just duplicate this. I'm going to send in another message, but this one, of course, is going to be different. This one is going to be a message that's going to correlate with what we currently have. And if I take a look, we want to trigger this message. And therefore, right now, the process is actually waiting for either message to come in. Whichever one comes in first, the process will go in that direction. So we want to send in this one here. So if I take a look at my model, the name of this message is Nile knows. Okay, so therefore in Postman I need to send a message with the name Nile knows. Now a very important thing is we had this business key that we sent in, and that's important because we could have a whole bunch of questions. And if I don't want to just send Nile knows into the engine to just trigger anything, and in fact it probably won't work. There's lots of different correlations, but instead I want to give it this specific business key. Okay, so for instance, if this was different and I sent this in and I have, instead of question, I'm going to have another variable called confidence, and that's going to be value of 10 because I'm very confident that I can handle this. And if I send this guy in, then I'm going to click send, and we should actually get a fail. We have a bad request. Now, why is that? And it says because it cannot correlate Nile knows because no definition matches these parameters. This means that there is a token waiting for this message, but not with this business key. It's a way of ensuring that we keep correlations going to the right instance. And in this case, I'm going to change this to 1, and now I'm going to send this along. Aha, success. No content. So that means that back in Opera, I should refresh this, and then we should see that we are now on answer the question. We are indeed. So you can see it went this way, and it also now has a shiny new variable called confidence. Okay. So I want to show you this little guy here in task list. So task list is of course the front-end application intended for end users of processes, and we should see in this task list we have here our diagram here, and we are about to answer the question. Okay, so I can load the variables and I can see the question is, how do you start a process with a message? My confidence of that is 10. Okay, so meanwhile, I want to show what happens if somebody then edits the message. Okay, so as we know, if the question gets edited, it'll actually trigger this message. Okay, so let's head back to Postman. And again, it's a message. This one's different though. This one is going to be called question edited. And again, the business key is important here. And the question is going to change to how far away is the sun? Okay, so let's send that along. Okay, no content again, great news. And if we go to Opera, we'll be able to see that if I refresh this, a token has been triggered by this, and we now have this read question again. That's pretty cool. As far as task list is concerned, we can see if I click on this again that I now have this guy here, read question again. Okay, now luckily I don't need to read the question again. I'm pretty confident. So I'm going to add a variable called answer, and it's a string. And the answer, of course, as everyone knows, is about 93 million miles away. That's why it looks so small. Okay, and let's complete this task. And once I complete it, you can see the other task disappeared, because once we complete this, we then don't really care about reading the question again because we've already sent an answer. Okay, and that's the happy path of the process. So next, let's try some more tricky things. Let's see what happens when my important work needs to be done, and of course when we need T-Dog's help for something. So for this, we're going to need to start up a few more instances of our process. So let's head back to our message and let's create a few more questions. So let's start by changing this to why will Camunda not start? Question mark. Good question. So let's send that one in. Great stuff. Let's add another business key and a different question. This one, how do timer events work? Send that one in. And number 4, what is the capital of Germany? Okay, there we go. That's 3 questions all sent in, and right now we should then see that we have, once we log in, we have 3 tokens all waiting right there and all waiting to find out whether I know the answer or not. So you can see here they all have their individual business keys. So let's pick one of them. Let's take a look at this one here. So this one says, why will Camunda not start? That seems like a question that's quite vague. So I'm going to pass that along to T-Dog. And to pass that to T-Dog, I need to send a message that says that I have no idea. So let's go back here and let's just duplicate this and let's have a look at what the name of the message is we need to send. Again, Niall has no idea is the message name. Okay, so let's put that there. And I'm sending this to a specific business key. Okay, so let's take a look at what business key that is. It's 2, so I'll copy that and head back. Now say this is 2, and I'll just maybe won't set any process variables at all because I don't really need to. So Niall has no idea is the name of the message we're sending, so let's send that along. No content, good stuff, which means this should have gone down here, triggered by this, and then ended this process while at the same time starting the other process. So yeah, there we go. So this process is actually ended, and if we click back here to our list of processes, we should see that T-Dog has 1 running instance. We can click on it here. We can see that it was triggered. There's the instance itself. And as you recall, using the API we sent on this question, why does Camunda not start? So now T-Dog has to go and solve that little problem. Good luck to him. So going back to our main process, the next thing that might happen, of course, is that I have some important work to do. So to do that, I need to send a signal in. Now, up until now, we've been using messages that send in a bunch of possible correlation keys. It could be a business key, it could be correlation variables, and the very important thing is there's some rules about these that we've been adhering to. The first one being that we actually can only correlate to one other message. It's technically possible to correlate to more than one via the API, but usually it's a good idea to follow the rules of the BPMN symbol itself and have a one-to-one correlation, which means that if I wanted to trigger a whole bunch of processes, that's when I would use a signal event, like in this case. So we have important work, and the idea is that this would trigger and cancel any other questions that I currently have. But this, of course, has a different API. So let's head back to the REST API documentation. And we should see here we have signal. And in signal, we have event. And again, we go down to the example, and we can see that basically we send in signal, the name of the signal, and variables. An important thing is that we don't have the same sort of correlation requirements. So for instance, if I put in here signal, and then I put some stuff here, and I don't actually need to care about if anyone would get, if one or more would get this, because a signal is kind of unique, because if a message doesn't actually find a recipient, it'll actually not be, it'll throw an error, it'll say, sorry, that was unsuccessful. But I can send in this, and even though there's no one waiting for it, this can be a success with 0 to n recipients. Okay, so let's take a look at what signal we need to send. It's going to be called important work. Okay, and I'm going to pop it there, and I'm just going to leave that there. Why not? And I'm going to send that signal into the engine. Okay, that's done. No content, good stuff. So that means that our cockpit, if I refresh this, it should have actually cancelled both instances of that process, which it did. We can see in the history there that both instances that were waiting here were both cancelled because the signal came in, and now I got to play some ping pong. So this is a way of being able to have not only it can be interrupting or non-interrupting. In this case, it interrupts the process, but it's a great way to broadcast something that must be picked up by multiple recipients. So I hope that enlightened you with some fun information about sending messages and how BPMN and Kimona deal with messages. And if you have any other questions, feel free to go to the forum, forum.kimona.org, and post some questions up there, and who knows, I might even answer them. Great, thanks a lot. Goodbye.